Good morning, everybody. We are on the record. The jurors are just finishing up their video, so we'll be bringing them in shortly for the group instruction, followed by individual instruction. But I did want to make a record that after Friday, I know the defense filed extensive briefs, affidavits, attachments regarding change of venue, and I had a chance to review those this weekend. And it does not change my decision, and so the motion for change of venue is still denied. And we will hopefully get you out written orders regarding the Spiegel, the reverse Spiegel, and the motions in limine this week by tomorrow or Wednesday. So with that, as soon as the jurors are ready, we'll bring them in. Anything else for the record before we do that? No. All right. You can be seated. All right, well, good morning, everyone. First of all, can you all hear me? Give me a thumbs up if you can hear me. Excellent. If at any time you need a hearing assistance devices, we have them available. Well, my name is Pete Cahill, and I am one of the judges of the district court, and you have been summoned as potential jurors in the case of State of Minnesota versus Derek Chauvin, which is a criminal case related to the death of George Floyd on May 25th, 2020. A person charged with a crime has a right to an impartial judge and an impartial jury. In order to make sure the jurors who are selected are impartial, the law provides that the court and the attorneys for the parties may ask questions to all prospective jurors, which must be answered under oath. First, thank you all for filling out the questionnaire and mailing it back to us. That gives us a good start on information about you. Your contribution to the important and serious matter at hand is best served by continuing to provide full, complete, and honest answers to the questions that you'll be asked today. Those questions will follow up on issues from the questionnaire and possibly other topics. Now, after the questioning is over, the attorneys will have the right to excuse some of you from service on this jury, and I may excuse others of you for what we call cause. In either case, it does not mean that you are not a fair person, and you should not take offense at being excused. I also ask that you not take any offense at any questions that are asked. We must pry, to some extent, in order to explore some opinions you might hold and to hear about experiences that you have had that might affect your ability to serve in this case. Now, the defendant, Mr. Chauvin, has been charged with murder in the second degree and manslaughter in the second degree. In the normal course of a trial, charges might be added or subtracted from that, but those are the charges as it stands today. Now, to the charges, the defendant has entered a plea of not guilty, which is a denial of each and every material allegation in the charges. I'm now going to have the participants introduce themselves so you can tell us if you have any kind of relationship with them, either acquaintanceship, friendship, or professional relationship. First for the state.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, everyone. My name is Steve Slisher, and I represent the state of Minnesota.
Good morning. My name is Christina Aranakis, and I'm assistant to the prosecution.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Keith Ellison, and I represent the state of Minnesota.
Good morning. Erin Eldridge for the state of Minnesota.
And for the defense.
Good morning. My name is Eric Nelson with my assistant Amy Voss. Together we represent Mr. Chauvin, who is the defendant.
Thank you. Anybody know anyone who has introduced themselves? Anyone have any kind of relationship with anybody else in the courtroom? All right. And if the answer is yes, just raise your hand, but I see no hands. Thank you. Does anyone know anyone else who works for the Attorney General's office? Because there might be some other attorneys who do appear during the trial, including Matthew Frank, Jerry Blackwell, and possibly others. Anybody recognize any of those names? Okay. Anybody know people who work at Mr. Nelson's law firm? Okay. Now, you've been given a list of potential witnesses in this case, and I'd like to have you review it before you're questioned individually. You'll be asked if you know anyone on the list. Now, one of the things the attorneys may not do during jury selection is to instruct you on the law, but I do want you to be aware of some of the basic concepts that apply in all criminal cases, so that you may keep them in mind as you answer the court's and the attorney's questions. So I will instruct you as follows. First, the charges against the defendant are not evidence, and they create no inference of guilt. No member of the jury should in any way permit himself or herself to be prejudiced against the defendant because a charge has been made against him or because he has been placed on trial. The defendant is presumed innocent of the charges made against him, and in order for you to find the defendant guilty, the state must prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. The defendant does not have to prove his innocence. The presumption of innocence remains with the defendant throughout the trial, unless and until he has been proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt according to the law and the evidence admitted at trial. Proof beyond a reasonable doubt is such proof as ordinarily prudent men and women would act upon in their most important affairs. A reasonable doubt is a doubt based upon reason and common sense. It does not mean a fanciful or capricious doubt, nor does it mean beyond all possibility of doubt. Now, if you serve on this jury, you and your fellow jurors will be the sole judges of whether a witness is to be believed and of the weight to be given their testimony. There are no hard and fast rules to guide you in this respect, but in determining believability and weight of testimony, jurors may take into consideration the witness's interest or lack of interest in the outcome of the case, their relationship to the parties, the ability and opportunity to know, remember, and relate the facts, their manner, their frankness and sincerity, or the lack thereof, their age and experience, the reasonableness or the unreasonableness of their testimony in light of all the other evidence in the case, and any other factors that bear on believability and weight. If on this jury, you should rely in the last analysis upon your own experience, good judgment, and common sense. Now, there are things you should not do during jury selection. You are not investigators. You are not to go out to do any looking, and you are not to ask people about this matter. You are not to use the internet to look for information about this case or about the law. Above all, you must not talk to anyone who is involved in the case, the lawyers, parties, witnesses, or spectators. Do not be offended if the attorneys, parties, witnesses, or spectators do not talk to you. They know that it would be improper to contact you, except through the normal selection process, and they will confine themselves to a brief greeting. Now, during the selection process, your family and friends will be curious as to what you are doing. You may tell them you are a potential juror in a criminal case, and that is all you should tell them. Since that is all you should tell family and friends, that is all you should tell the general public. So, during the proceedings, please refrain from using Facebook, Twitter, or other social media to announce that you are a potential juror or to comment on this trial. You may access those social media tools, with the exception of your news feeds that might give you media advice about the case, but please do not publish any information about this case or your thoughts about this case. You do not have to stay away from people and refuse to speak to them. Do whatever you wish, but do not talk about the case, and above all, do not talk to anyone involved in it. Now, because of the nature of the charges, this case is receiving media coverage. Do not read about this case in the newspapers or online, and do not listen to news about it on radio or television. In fact, do whatever you can to avoid news coverage of this, and the best way to do that is avoid news coverage altogether. Now, this trial, including jury selection, is being televised, but no video of you or any other juror will be taken at any time, now or during the trial if you are selected. Also, your name will not be used in the courtroom. You will only be referred to by your random number to protect your privacy. The audio of anything you say will be broadcast unless we need to discuss something that is deeply personal or extremely sensitive or embarrassing or would tend to identify you specifically. In that case, I will specifically order that the audio not be broadcast. In that case, you will still have to answer questions on the record, but without audio or video broadcast outside of this courtroom. Now, with the exception of Juror 115, we'll have you wait in the other courtroom until it is your turn to be questioned. You'll go with the deputy, but please keep in mind we are trying to keep COVID precautions as much as possible. I'm going to return to wearing my mask as soon as I'm done instructing you. Use all the hand sanitizers and wipes that you would like. So if you could go with the deputy, except for juror number 115. right, Juror 115, if you could come on up. Have a seat right next to me in the witness chair. Right here, yeah. Well, good morning.
Good morning.
First, I'm going to swear you in so that all your answers are under oath.
Okay.
So if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm, under penalty of perjury, that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
I do.
All right. Okay, you have plexiglass in front of you. There's plexiglass between us.
Mhm.
The lawyers will be about a good distance away with their own plexiglass.
Okay.
The bottom line being, if you would like, I'll keep my mask on. You may remove your mask if you think it would be more comfortable or to be heard more clearly.
Oh.
I leave it totally up to you.
Okay.
Whether or not you have your mask on, I would ask that you pull up to the microphone a little bit. It doesn't move very well, so we have to move you a little,
Oh.
just so that we can make sure that we can hear you.
Is this okay?
Perfect,
Okay.
perfect. And I'll play with the controls a little bit to make sure its volume up is as much as we need.
Okay.
A couple things before I turn it over to the attorneys. First of all, you filled out the questionnaire. Thank you for doing that. A lot of good information. Is everything true on the questionnaire?
Yes.
Anything you wanted to change or add to the questionnaire?
Not that I know of.
Okay. Yeah, that's kind of a broad question. When the attorneys are asking you questions, they will probably go more through individual questions, and they're likely to read both the question and your answer. Not to be confrontational,
Right.
but just to remind you what your exact answer was, because it's been a while.
Yeah, for sure.
The important thing to understand is it's been a couple months since you filled out that questionnaire, so you may have realized I should have put this in, or I need to change that answer, it wasn't quite accurate, or even my opinions have evolved and I need to let them know that. The bottom line is that you should feel comfortable giving answers that are different than your questionnaire.
Okay.
Okay? You weren't supposed to read any articles, but again, it's been a couple months, and given the amount of news coverage on this case, we recognize you may have inadvertently been exposed to a headline, maybe a blurb on the news about this case, or about related civil cases, or things like that. Have you been exposed to anything like that since you filled out the questionnaire till today?
I've avoided anything. If I've seen anything involving it or anybody talking about it at work, I tend to just kind of
Okay.
myself, get out of there, just to avoid it as much as possible. So.
Yeah, we put you in a tough spot because we say don't listen to people talking about it, but
Right.
you can't tell them you're a potential juror. So
Right.
it's a
Sometimes.
tough spot. We recognize that. Anything else you may have seen about pretrial matters, the parties, anything?
Not really. I mean, like I said, if I saw like a headline on the news, I'd be like, okay, bye.
Okay.
I'd like leave quick. And
Do you remember anything about the headlines?
Not really. It'd just be like if I saw like Floyd's name or something, that would be it. And I'd be like, okay, can't watch this. So.
I'm gonna turn up your microphone
Okay,
a little
sorry.
bit. If I can.
I can also take my mask off. If that's,
Well, but
might be a
it's
reason.
whatever. But if you don't feel comfortable, you can put it back on.
I got my vaccine. I'm all good.
Okay. Likewise. Okay. All right. So a couple things. You have to decide this case only on what you hear and see in the courtroom.
Right.
Do you think you could do that?
Yes.
Okay. It's all right to know about the case and have opinions when you filled out the questionnaire, but you now have to put aside everything you've heard, put aside your opinions, just be neutral, impartial. And some people, based on the amount of coverage they've seen, or just that, given the nature of the case, they tell me, no, I can't do it. I can't put that stuff aside.
Right.
Others say, no, I can do it. Where do you fall on that?
I know that like the stuff I've seen about everything isn't the whole truth and isn't the whole story. So
Okay.
anything that I already know, I know that it might not even be true.
Okay.
Anything like that. So I can look at it from both sides and be like, yes, this, find
Good.
out, look at the facts, and decide from there.
Okay.
So
Did you recognize any witnesses who were on the list?
no.
Okay. And the length of trial we estimate is about 4 weeks once we start next Monday. You'll be on your own if you're selected until then. Does that work for you?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Now, last thing before I turn you over to the attorneys is this is kind of a more formal, stilted conversation. Normally in conversation, you'll do exactly that, kind of affirm and We're going to require that as much as possible. And I'm going to tell you, the lawyers and I are the worst on all this stuff. Try not to talk over anybody. Kind of wait till they're done talking and then you can talk. And try and keep your voice up and near the microphone.
Okay.
And that way the court reporter can take down a good record when we only have one person talking at a time.
Okay.
All right?
Yep.
Any
Sounds good.
questions?
I don't think so.
All right, then Mr. Nelson, as to juror number 115, you may inquire.
Good morning, ma'am.
Good morning.
Thank you for being here today and for taking the time to fill out your questionnaire. I just have a few questions to ask you. First, kind of general questions, get to know you a little bit better, and then I'm going to follow up with some of the responses on your questionnaire, if that's okay.
Yep.
And again, we're not trying to trick you. I know it's been a while since you've filled that out. I'll actually read to you the question and your response when we get there, okay?
Okay. Yeah.
All right. So if you and I were to meet under different circumstances, a social event, a party, whatnot, what are a few things I walk away learning about you during our first conversation?
I would say you think I'm a nice person. At least I'd like to think that. I'm honest. Not sure what else I would say. Sorry,
Okay.
it's kind of a...
That's all right. Any special hobbies, interests, things of that nature?
I like reading, of course, watching like Netflix and stuff, anything like that.
Okay. You had obviously heard about this case before you learned you were a juror or a potential juror, right?
Yeah, yes, sorry.
Sorry, it's awkward, I know. When you learned that you were a potential juror on this case, what was your initial reaction?
It was kind of shock. It was like, you know, what are the odds? But that was kind of like the initial feeling, just, I can't believe it, you know.
Sure.
But that was...
Did you have concerns about your physical safety, COVID, anything of that nature?
I didn't, no. So.
Okay. And what did you think when you came down and saw the government center this morning?
I just saw the fencing and I saw that I like couldn't park or anything and I was like, oh no. But that was about it. It was just kind of seeing a bunch of people outside. I was like, oh geez.
Yeah. Did it make you feel safe? Did it concern you? What was your reaction to seeing it?
I would say safe with all like the really high fencing and seeing all like the security and stuff. I was like, okay, this is cool.
All right.
So
And then when you heard what the judge just read a little bit ago about trying to keep you anonymous, how did that make you feel?
I thought that was a really good idea. I've been, you know, haven't told really anybody about anything about this or, you know, I told my mom, I was like, oh, I got picked for jury duty, but, you know, that's all
Okay.
I've been saying. So
All right.
all that.
Now, at some point, however, if you were selected on the jury to be a juror on this jury, when the court deems it safe to do so, your name would be released. Does that concern you?
Not really. I don't think it would, you know, be an issue for me. I don't think.
Okay, fair enough. I know, again, generally without saying where you work, but I know you work as a nursing assistant, right? And
Yes, sorry.
you know, between your professional life or your personal life, can you think about a situation where you've been called upon to resolve conflict between two people?
Not that I can recall off the top of my head,
Okay.
but I like to think of myself as a mediator and somebody who can kind of be like, okay, let's look at both sides,
Right.
figure it out, and, you know, work together
Okay.
to get to the end goal.
So, like, maybe you have two friends who come to you and they say, this is my side of the story, this is my side of the story, and you see yourself as a mediator in that situation?
I would say so. I think I could, you know, be a good middle person and be like, okay, let's figure this out.
All right.
I think.
I mean, ultimately, this case is about quite a bit of conflict, right?
Right.
There's the conflict between the state and Mr. Chauvin, but as a juror, you may experience conflict in the deliberation room. Have you given that any thought?
I have, but of course, I've never done like this, anything like this before, so I don't know how it would go. But I've definitely thought about that. So,
Okay. What were your thoughts about that? How would you deal with that? You know.
just that it would be an issue. And again, kind of just looking at it like you have to look at the facts and just explain myself and why I think the way I think and take in what other people think and,
Okay.
use that
So-
to determine.
So we're going to listen to both sides,
Yep.
look at the evidence, etc.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you think it's different if you're observing the conflict and trying to resolve the conflict versus if you're involved in the conflict yourself?
I mean, if you were involved, I guess, or if I was involved, it would be a little different. But, like if I was like part of like one of the sides or something, but looking in from the outside, I don't think it would be, a problem for me.
Okay. So are you willing to, re-examine your own views, listen to other jurors?
Mm-hmm. For sure.
And
Yes.
I get it. It's,
Sorry.
I think you covered the whole gamut there. But what if you're just, you really believe in your side? What do you
Right. Well, and that's like what I was mentioning earlier is I know that what I've seen and what I know now isn't the whole story and it isn't everything that there is. And that's why I think I can look at this and, with a clean slate because I consciously know like, stuff that I saw on Facebook and stuff like that probably isn't facts or isn't all facts and stuff like that. So,
Okay.
yeah.
So, how do you, again, if you can think in your personal or professional life, how do you determine if someone is telling you the truth?
I am a pretty bad person to tell, like if someone's telling the truth or lying. And I know that for a fact, but I just kind of, go with my gut, the feeling. But for me, there's no like actual way to tell. Like I can't
Right.
consciously be like, oh, that's why that person is lying or something like that.
Sure. And maybe it's not a conscious lie, right? But can you think of a situation where two people may be observing the identical situation and have completely different perspectives about what's happening?
Could you repeat that? Sorry.
Sure. Do you think it's possible for two people to observe a situation from the same position at the same time and have a completely different perspective about what's happening?
I think so, since, people build biases like subconsciously and consciously, I can totally see that can look at something and have two totally different opinions on what happened.
Okay.
So,
What types of factors do you think, other than you said the bias that someone may have, conscious or implicit bias, what other factors do you think may change a person's perspective?
life experiences and, past things that have happened, I would say would be the biggest factor that I can think of right now.
Okay.
Um,
Do you think a person's training or education may impact how they perceive it?
I could see that being the case.
Okay.
Probably,
Why?
Just because, you're a product of your environment, I guess, is what people like to say. So that could be something, but...
Okay. Have you ever been 100% certain of something only to later learn you were wrong?
Probably, but I can't recall.
Sure. Kind of, maybe it's a common thing, maybe it's a small
Yeah.
thing, but
Right.
how would you handle that if you were in that situation? If
I'd
you-
be like, okay, I get it. I was wrong. I like to think I'd be a bigger person and be like, yeah, I understand.
Do you think you can take those experiences and apply them to subsequent decision making?
I think so.
Why?
Because it's how that's how I've always grown up and was taught to do, I don't want to be wrong and then keep looking like I'm wrong. You know what I mean? It just wouldn't make sense for me to
Sure.
be like, oh, I'm still right when I know it's wrong or anything like that. So,
Okay, fair enough. Now, you understand that your role as a juror is to weigh the evidence as it's presented in court, and only the evidence presented in court.
right.
And at the end of the case, the judge will give you the instructions of law. And you may read those instructions and you may say, that can't possibly be right. Or I think we need to change this law. Do you think that you can follow the law even if you think it's wrong or it should be changed?
I think so. I always like to think that I'm a person that would like follow the law, and when I look at the laws, I'm like, well, that's how it is. So, just how it has to go.
Okay. I'm going to just follow up with some of your responses, if you don't mind. You reference, or there are several references in this questionnaire about some videos that were released publicly. And there was a bystander video that went viral, I think on Facebook. And then there were some body-worn cameras and then some security cameras from area businesses that were released publicly. Which of those videos do you think you've seen most frequently?
The one that I can actually, the only one that I can recall is the bystander one, and that was right, in the beginning of everything. And I would say I saw that one in the full length only once, but then of course I'd see small little clips or something pop up, but a few times. But otherwise, that's the only video that I've seen of it. So.
And I think you say that you're not a regular consumer of the news, right?
Mm-mm. No, I don't watch anything like that, on TV or anything,
Okay.
So
the clips that you've seen are you're scrolling through your phone on social media, you see a short clip?
I would say so, for the most part.
Okay. And when you said you saw the full-length video once, did it just pop up in your feed, or did you go search it out based on what people were sharing?
It popped up on my feed, on my Facebook feed, and then I was like, oh, what's this? And I watched, and so that's where I saw that.
Okay.
But,
you were asked a question just to kind of say what it was that you remember seeing and observing. And you wrote, I was on Facebook when I first saw people talking about George Floyd. Eventually a video popped up on my Facebook feed where I saw the interaction between George Floyd and the defendant. One of the defendants had their knee on George Floyd's neck or upper back area, and another one was talking to people around the scene. I don't recall seeing the others in the video, and I don't know what led to the interaction. Do you, since you filled this out, have you learned anything else about the case?
no, as soon as I found out that I would potentially be on this case, like I said, I avoided everything.
Okay.
So.
You were asked about your general impression of the defendant, and you checked the box somewhat negative. And you wrote, I feel like one of them could have tried to de-escalate the situation.
Right.
What do you mean by that?
I was talking about the other officers that were on the scene. It just, like I said, the one video that I saw looked like something could have been done, but I don't know anything that led up to it, so I don't know the whole story. And that was kind of the initial thought was, oh, why didn't somebody do something? But, that was now that I'm thinking, I'm like, well, it's more complicated than that, and I know that, so.
Sure. I mean, and one of the things that may be presented as evidence in this case are police training on de-escalation or police policies and things of that nature. It's fair to say you're not acquainted with the Minneapolis Police Department's policies?
Yeah, no, I'm not.
Or law enforcement training in general, right?
Yeah, no, I'm not.
And so if you were to hear testimony about those types of things, do you think you could judge it based on the testimony as it's presented in court?
I would say so.
You can set aside your previous impression and judge this based on what you see in the case.
Yes.
With respect to Mr. Floyd, you had a neutral general impression of Mr. Floyd, and you wrote, I don't know him personally and haven't heard much about who he was in his day-to-day life. Do you think his day-to-day life affects this case?
Not really. It was just, I don't have any impression on him because I don't know who he is. There's no negative or positive thoughts about him because, like I said, I don't know him.
Sure.
So and I can't judge somebody that quick like that.
Okay. Now you were asked a question about your conversations with family, friends, coworkers, or discussing it online. It was one big question, and you checked obviously yes, you had. So I'm going to parse it out a little bit. Did you post opinions online?
No, I don't think so. Or I might have shared some stuff on Facebook, but it wasn't. I can't recall completely what it was. It was a long time ago.
Sure. But you did have conversations with your family and friends or coworkers about the case.
Like my mom, I told her, this was the case and stuff, but that was about it, We don't talk about it. She doesn't need, like, if anything pops up when they're watching the news, she's like, don't tell Allie. Like, that's what she told me. So I was like, okay.
Okay.
So,
You wrote that you had shared the opinion that you believe it was not his time to die, and that the incident should not have gone as far as it did. Can you explain that a little more?
yeah, I don't think it was his time to go, of course. And I think my answer kind of really shows what I thought about it. I don't know. It's just like I said earlier, it seemed like the situation went a little further than it needed to, or a bit further than it needed to, so that's kind of my thoughts on it.
Right. And you did you personally participated in a couple of marches, and you carried a sign
Yes.
that had a fist on it, I think.
Yes.
Why did you do that?
My friend invited me to go. We were living in Minneapolis at the time, and it was close by. And she's like, "You want to go?" And it's something I'd never done before, so I was like, "Yeah, we should do it." And
So what was it about the march that you thought it would be, I don't know, entertaining or interesting or just an experience? Like, why did you think that?
Well, because like I said, I'd never done something like that before, and I've seen that stuff, in movies or whatever. So it looked interesting, and of course I'd seen the video and things. So I was like, yeah, let's go check it out, and
Okay.
so that's what I did.
And why did you decide to carry the sign you did?
Because my friend and I we were making the signs before. She said, we should carry these, and I was like, yeah. So
Okay.
we did those.
So you made some other signs as well?
I didn't make other ones, but it was like she made one, I made one, and then I think like her boyfriend made one too, or something like that. So
Okay. Was your participation sort of contemporaneous to the time, or was it like when the incident occurred, or was it weeks later?
I want to say it was about a week later, I think.
Okay. You were asked a question about whether you believe your community had been negatively or positively affected by any of the protests, and you wrote, where I live was unaffected by any protests, so no.
Yeah.
But I guess in the general sense, in the broader sense, do you think that the ensuing protests had a positive or negative effect on the Twin Cities community as a whole?
I think the protests themselves didn't have any kind of impact. I think it was like a statement, But I think, like, of course, you can't deny the stuff that happened afterwards with, like, the rioting and stuff. That was definitely a negative impact, but not the protests themselves, I don't think, were negative or positive or anything.
Right. You talked earlier about kind of bias, implicit bias, and actual bias, I guess, or conscious bias are the terms you used. So the questions that I have are, do you think that you have an opinion, and that's okay, right? But we have to be conscious of our implicit bias, right? And do you think you can set aside your bias in this case and neutrally and fairly judge this case?
I would say so, just because, like, right in, like, the heat of everything and, with all that going on, of course, it was, like, a different thing. Since then, I've been able to think about it and be consciously aware, like, okay, I am just putting out what I've seen on, social media or anything like that. So I know, like, since then, I've told myself, like, okay, you can look at things from a different perspective, have more of an open mind, and all that. So I think I would be pretty decent at that.
Okay. I mean, as the judge just kind of instructed, Mr. Chauvin has no obligation to prove his innocence, right?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And he's in fact presumed innocent. You understand that? And the state has the burden of proving its case beyond a reasonable doubt.
Mm-hmm.
So, kind of again, starting from zero, the defense should not have to convince you to get you back up to innocent and then get to the proof beyond a reasonable doubt, right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you and will you apply the presumption of innocence?
Yes, I can.
And will you hold the state to its burden?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
You were asked a series of questions. They were actually statements, kind of these broad statements, and you were asked to rank your opinion to these statements from like strongly agree to strongly disagree. Do you remember that exercise?
Yes.
All right.
Don't remember the details though.
No, of course. I'm going to just read you a couple of the statements and ask you. There were two statements that are similar in nature, and your responses were similar. The first was, police in my community make me feel safe, and you somewhat agreed with that proposition. And the other is, I do not trust the police, and you somewhat disagreed with that. So similar question asked a different way, and your responses were similar. Why do you have some lingering doubt about police officers?
No, I don't think there's anything there. I guess I would say, like, really, what is it, strongly agree with it? I would change that first one that you mentioned to strongly agree, because, yeah, there's no reason for me to have any thought that the police would be, like, not there to protect me. So.
Okay. I mean, I guess the question is, had you had conversations with friends or coworkers that led you to believe that maybe police don't keep people safe?
I've probably had conversations with people like that before. I think so. But that's, again, since then, I've been like, okay, we gotta think for yourself and not just what you hear. So,
Right.
you know.
There's a statement that says blacks and other minorities do not receive equal treatment as whites in the criminal justice system, and you strongly agreed. What was your basis for your strong agreement to that?
Just things that I've learned and, you know, looked at prior to any of this stuff. And when I was in college, I took some classes, and there was like it was like a gender and women's studies class, and then we really talked about like different races and stuff like that. So that was kind of my basis for that statement, you know.
Okay. There is a statement that reads, because law enforcement officers have such dangerous jobs, it is not right to second guess decisions they make while on duty, and you strongly disagreed with that.
I think like the training and stuff should be able to, you know, help counteract anything like that, you know, it should help with making those big decisions without making any rash, bad judgment, you know, on the spot, I would think.
Okay. So I guess the question is just like any other profession, just like any other decision someone may make in life, there's a spectrum of decision making. Would you agree with that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So there may be a situation where an officer, let's say, steals drugs from the evidence room,
Mm-hmm.
right? And you would agree, would you not, that's a different decision than a very rapid decision or something that happens in the heat of a struggle.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And would you agree that it's okay to, you know, question the officer about his theft of drugs?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. But, you know, there can be situations where an officer is chasing someone down, you know, who is wanted for, you know, violent offenses. They're chasing that person down a dark alley. The person turns suddenly towards the officer, points something. The officer reacts very quickly.
Right.
And maybe what that pointed was a cell phone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that under those circumstances, police officers' decisions should be second-guessed?
I guess not so much, you know, not as much as like the stealing drugs from a evidence room, you know, that, you know, thinking on your feet and doing that, I guess could, you know, be something
Sure.
different, totally different kind
Right.
of.
I mean, do you think that it should still be looked at and investigated? But
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, exactly.
okay.
Mhm.
And again, I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm just, you know, trying to get your opinions.
Mhm.
So you were asked two questions, one with respect to Black Lives Matter and one with respect to Blue Lives Matter.
Mhm.
With respect to Black Lives Matter, you had a very favorable impression, and you wrote, I believe that black people are discriminated against, and I want equality for everyone. And with respect to Blue Lives Matter, you had a very unfavorable view and said police officers are able to remove their uniform each day and don't have to deal with being an officer 24/7.
Right.
So can you just explain those kind of thoughts and ideas a little more?
Yeah, so, historically, black people have been oppressed in this country, I would say. And so the Black Lives Matter movement to me is favorable because, I just want everybody to be equal playing field, everything, equality would be amazing. And then for the Blue Lives Matter one, unfavorable because, like I said, police officers are only police officers when they have their uniform on. They don't have to live with the skin, that black people do and things like that. So they, like I said, they can take it off and, go day to day and still live their life. And
Right, and I guess obviously this case involves police officers, police policy. There will be witnesses who are police officers, both for and against Mr. Chauvin, right? Can you weigh if you have a somewhat unfavorable view, right, of that? Can you weigh the testimony of a police officer on the same footing as any other citizen?
Oh, for sure. And I'm somebody to say that, it goes person to person. Like, I'm not somebody to say that, like, all cops are bad, when you'd see that stuff. It was more there are, like, the bad apples and stuff like that. And I know that's the case. Like, there's going to be good people. There's no reason for me to doubt somebody because they have a certain uniform on, just like how I wouldn't doubt somebody because of the color of their skin,
Right. And would it be the converse as well, or I guess the inverse as well, which is would you ascribe or assign greater credibility to someone simply because they are a police officer?
I don't think so. I wouldn't be greater or lesser or anything. It's,
Okay.
person is a person to me, so.
You were asked a couple of questions regarding your opinions on the justice system. And the question reads, do you believe our criminal justice system works? Why or why not? And you wrote, I think it works most of the time, but not always. What does that mean? And what do you base that answer on?
Goes back to, like, when I was saying how minorities and stuff aren't equal in this country, and sometimes I think it can fail them and things can be stacked against them and stuff. So
Okay.
I guess that's kind of the main point and reason for that,
Sure.
for that answer.
Now, you ultimately were asked, do you want to serve as a juror in this case? And you wrote yes. And you wrote why. I've never done any. The reason you gave for the why is I've never done jury duty before, so it should be interesting to see how it works.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So just kind of curious as to the process, right?
Yeah, for the most part. Now it's also knowing that I can be an unbiased opinion was kind of my thought process for now. So kind of changing the answer there a little bit was, yes, it'd be interesting. And, I think since then I've like grown and thought more about it. And I'm like, okay, I can think for myself. So.
Okay. If I may have a moment here.
Yeah.
Defense will exercise it for
All right. You're 115. You're excused from this panel, so you're also excused from jury service generally, so you won't be called up on another case. Unless, of course, you get sent to summons years from now. So we appreciate you taking all the time to fill out the questionnaire and to be here this morning. So thank you so much. You can go with the deputy. He'll take some paperwork from you. Hmm? come on up, have a chair. Good morning. You are juror number 116.
I am.
All right. First thing I'm going to do is swear you in because all your answers have to be under oath. So if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm under penalty of perjury that you will truthfully answer all questions about your qualifications to serve as a juror?
Okay.
All right. And I'm going to have you pull up to the microphone, but also note we have plexiglass between us, and I'm going to keep my mask on. We have plexiglass in front of you. The lawyers are going to be questioning you from a distance away with their own plexiglass. What all that means is if you would like, either for comfort or to speak clearly, you may remove your mask as you deem appropriate.
Sure.
Keep it on, take it off, totally up to you. Okay? But in either case, whether you have the mask on or off, I'm going to have you pull up to the microphone. That should be enough. And I can adjust a little bit too, so don't worry about that. Just so we can hear you loud and clear. And also, when we're talking, sometimes we tend to finish each other's sentences like a normal conversation. We have to try and avoid that. And affirmations in the middle of a question like, get me to the end of this question. Just wait for the question and then give the answer after, so we don't have people talking over each other. Because that makes it really hard for the court reporter. And as you've already seen, I'm the worst offender at it. So don't worry about it if it happens, but just try your best. First of all, you filled out a questionnaire, and thank you very much for doing that. It gives us a lot of good information. Was everything on that questionnaire true?
To the best of my knowledge, yes. I believe certain things have changed, I guess, since then.
Okay.
Well, it's been a while since I answered it, so. Yes, when I answered it, everything was accurate. True.
Okay, you've kind of anticipated my next question, which is any changes or additions to the questionnaire that you can think of right now?
The only thing that comes to mind right now, my company has changed their policy on jury duty and whatnot, so I will not be getting paid for it.
Oh.
So, well, I'll get paid for a portion. So that is a concern of mine. So.
Okay, so they aren't going to give you your normal wage when you're...
Yeah, I mean, it's their choice to make, I guess, but they did change that policy, which was not a concern before.
Okay.
Now it is more of a concern.
Okay. Do you know why they changed it suddenly?
I don't.
Financially, I think just about everybody is affected.
Yeah, I mean, everyone's going to be affected. I mean, it would be stressed,
Okay.
but, I mean,
I think the standard that some people use is, well, first of all, would have to be a financial hardship. For example, would you still be able to pay your rent or your mortgage and do all that?
Yes, there wouldn't be any problem there. I mean,
Okay.
It'd just be a slight setback, I guess.
All right. Would it be such a hardship, or at least on your mind, that you could not pay attention to what's going on in the courtroom?
No.
Okay. All right. As far as other changes or additions, the lawyers will ask you specific questions out of your questionnaire. Usually they will read the question and also the answer, not to be confrontational, but just to remind you what your answer was.
Mm-hmm.
If you find that you need to change something, maybe an opinion's evolved or you forgot to put something in, or like you say, now you've got a company policy change. It's just want you to know it's okay to give answers that are different from the questionnaire. We know it's been a couple months and you might realize there's some things that are inaccurate or need to be added. So feel free to say something that is different. You're not supposed to read any articles or watch any type of media about this case. But we understand that given the extensive news coverage on this, that between when you filled out the questionnaire and today, you might have been exposed inadvertently to some things. And I know you're generally not a news junkie, it looks
I
like.
am not, but even avoiding it, there are bits and pieces that,
Right.
come out.
What, if you can think back since you filled out the questionnaire, what kind of substance have you heard? Like,
Really?
see a headline or a blurb?
Yeah,
on
I
TV?
mean, it's been quite some time that I've known that I will be on potentially, question about this. So it's still an intentional choice to, avoid everything. But mainly the stuff that I heard. Obviously, the settlement I've heard because you can't not hear that. And
Well, let's talk about that one specifically for a second. Do you recall how much the settlement was for?
I do.
And what was it in your...
27 million.
Okay, and how did you react to that?
I understand. In my mind
Yeah.
why it happened and that it was going to happen at one point or another. Just that portion of it needed to be wrapped up.
Okay.
And as this, whoever was involved with it, because I'm not really familiar. I mean, them finishing that prior to the trial is just makes it less complicated.
How do you think that would affect your decision here as a juror?
I don't really know if it would, personally.
Well, it gets to the topic, which is no matter what you've heard outside the courtroom,
Yep.
you have to put all that aside.
Yep.
And you have to decide the case just on the evidence you hear, not on what you heard outside, and even not on any opinions you may have formed. It's all right to form opinions, but you have to put all that aside and decide this case just on the facts and the law that I give you.
Absolutely.
Could you do that?
I believe so.
Like, could you even put this settlement thought aside?
Yeah, I don't see that the settlement actually sways me one way or the other on that.
Okay.
Because it's kind of a neutral decision between whatever that it is wrapped up.
Okay, and it's different parties, different
Doesn't really.
different issues, different laws. It's not going to come into this case, I can tell you that. So you can put that aside and not have it bias you one way.
That doesn't wouldn't sway my decision or thoughts on that.
Okay. One of the questions we asked you was, well, it was a long and more complicated, my fault, but it basically said, can you be fair and impartial? And you answered yes. Do you think you've moved off of that because of something you might have heard?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
I believe that everything is based off of how it's presented, the facts, everything that's presented within the trial. That's where the decision's made. I guess I haven't heard anything one way or the other that really makes my mind up right now.
Getting back to what you may have heard in the media, exposed to a headline, that type of thing. Anything other than that settlement that you can think of?
No, the only thing that I guess actually did stick is details of the trial.
Okay.
The date, the dates, what amount of jurors, stuff like that. But like I said, I don't watch the news.
Okay.
So
Great. Did you recognize any of the witnesses who were on that list?
no.
All right. And we've already talked a little bit about the length of trial. Other than you may take a bit of a hit there, anything else that would keep you from being able to sit here for 4 weeks?
No.
Okay. I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Nelson, but before I do so, any questions for me?
Not at this time.
Okay. Mr. Nelson, as to juror number 116, you may inquire.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Thank you again for your time today and for taking the time to fill out the questionnaire. I'm going to just start with a series of, general questions, get to know you and your thinking a little bit better, and then I'll follow up with some questions on the questionnaire. Okay? Sound like a plan?
Sounds good.
All right. So if you and I were to meet under a different circumstance, some social gathering of some sort, and we have our first conversation, What are a couple things I learned about you during that conversation?
First of all, I'm a very quiet guy, so there's only a couple of topics that might come up.
Okay.
Or not might come up, but other than just a simple greeting and whatnot, I'm not really gonna engage too much, I suppose.
Okay.
But one thing everyone knows is I like to fish.
That you like to fish?
Yes.
Okay.
And I guess
All year round, ice fishing?
I don't do as much ice fishing anymore, but mainly competitive fishing. So
Okay.
locally.
Fair enough. Good. You'd obviously heard about this case before you knew you were going to be a potential juror, right?
Yes.
And my question is when you learned that you were a potential juror on this case specifically, what was your first reaction?
Oh boy, man, wow, I don't know what all that is going to entail.
Sure.
So,
Yeah, I mean, I get it. You know, it's a kind of it's a big case, and it was a little shocking, right? Did you have any concerns at that time about your personal safety, your physical safety, your family safety, COVID? What were your?
I mean, things probably run through your head. Safety is obviously a concern for my family more than myself, I suppose. But there are concerns, or there have been concerns, especially right away going through your mind is, boy, is this actually something that's, regardless of how a trial goes, there might be parties one side or the other that, there's extremists on both sides, always.
Okay.
Could be, potentially.
Sure. Do you, when you came down to the government center this morning and you saw sort of the preparations and fencing and fortifications and things of that nature, how did that make you feel?
Very at ease, I guess. There's nobody coming in or out that shouldn't be, it looks like.
Sounds good. When you heard the judge this morning indicate that, you're not going to be on TV and we're trying to protect your anonymity, how did that make you feel?
That does make a big difference.
Okay. At some point, when the judge determines it to be safe, your name will be released. Do you understand that?
I have heard that.
And we don't know when that will be. The judge will make a determination on the timing of that. So does that give you concerns knowing that at some point in the future your name may be released?
I feel that most likely it's going to be done in everyone's best interest. It's not going to be, I would hope it's not right away, but, I would imagine that when the courts and everyone feel that it's safe, then that would be, what happens, I guess.
Okay. In your personal or professional life, can you think of a situation where you've been called upon to resolve a conflict between two people?
I can't think of anything specific, but my working life, it's, or in general, things come up, but I can't think of anything specific at this time.
I think you have a couple of kids. Do they ever have disagreements with each other?
Oh, they do. They're very different ages.
Right.
And so their disagreements aren't like two that may be very close in age.
Sure.
So,
I guess the question really kind of goes to, the conflict that emerges in this case at various levels.
mm-hmm.
There's a case between the state of Minnesota and Mr. Chauvin that needs to be resolved. And there's the potential for conflict in the jury deliberation room.
Mm-hmm.
How do you think you knowing yourself, how do you approach conflict between two people?
A lot of it based on either the situation, the facts, it's that would be, I guess, how I generally look at things. So I don't know, what may come up or what not, but it's talk about it, figure out what's going on, and go from there.
Okay. Do you think it's different if you have kind of a horse in the race, like if you're involved in the conflict and people are disagreeing with you? Do you think it's different for you?
Yeah, I mean, I would imagine if you have some stake in the game, you're gonna go about it a different way, I suppose.
Okay. How do you think you would go about it if you felt very strongly about something and there was a group of people who disagreed with you?
Yeah, I mean, you're going to ignore a few things one way or the other, and you're going to push your agenda.
Okay. Are you willing to re-examine your agenda?
I mean, yeah,
I mean, I guess
I
ultimately
don't
you
know
understand.
the question actually quite.
Fair enough. I'll phrase it a slightly different
There
way.
we go.
Ultimately, your job as a juror is to look at the evidence as it's presented in this trial. You understand that?
Yes, I do.
And you may interpret the evidence in one way, and jurors may interpret it in another way.
Yep.
So I guess the question is, are you the type of person that will dig your heels in and refuse to change your opinion, or are you going to listen to the other jurors, take what they have to say, and make a decision based on the totality of the facts as presented in court?
Absolutely. Yep. So I stand behind what I believe or what I understand, but I'm not willing to, or I'm not, if it's brought to me that this is, what, is somebody's opinion or somebody's view of the facts, I mean, that is something that definitely would be discussed, and and there may be maybe 3 different views on what something was presented, and I would imagine that would be something that would get talked about, and if it's presented in a way that I guess it's that it makes sense, I would. I guess that's all I got on that.
Okay, fair enough. Can you think of a situation where you tried to determine if someone is lying to you?
I mean, that's kind of an everyday thing. That's, you would assume,
Right.
you need to,
Well,
I can't think of a situation, but you would,
so you're kind of making that assessment every time you meet.
every time you meet somebody, every time somebody tells you something,
So how do you approach that, right? How do you make that determination? This person is telling me the truth or not?
I guess based on knowledge and experience and what I know, I guess I would just make that call, and then this day and age, not in this situation, but in this day and age, it's very easy to prove things one way or the other if somebody's lying to you.
Sure.
But and then that says a lot about somebody, so you know from there.
Right. Do you think that two people can observe an incident and see it from different perspectives? The same thing. They're watching the same
Absolutely.
event. Why and what?
Different backgrounds, different ways of thinking. I mean, whether they're just their family history, their the way they were raised, I suppose they would easily be able to see things 2 completely different ways, because if somebody hasn't been in that situation, that scenario, that whatever, I would imagine that they would definitely see it differently.
Okay. Have you ever been 100% convinced about something only to later learn you were wrong?
I think everyone has.
How do you respond to that?
I mean, if you're wrong, you're wrong. I mean, it's if you were, it depends on the situation. I mean, where you put yourself out there and said, hey, no, I am 100% right, and you were wrong. You eat your words, and and I mean, depends on the situation, obviously.
Sure.
So,
Do you try to learn from that and apply it to future situations?
Absolutely. Nobody would like to be out there saying one thing, knowingly know that they're wrong, and so yeah. I mean, if you learn something, you really should be able to learn from that. So if you made that mistake, I imagine.
Fair enough. Now, you may ultimately, you understand the evidence will be presented in this case, and your job will be to apply the law as the judge gives it to you. You may read the law and you may think this can't be right, or you may think we really need to change this law. So my question here for you is, in this case, can you apply the law as the judge gives it to you, even if you think it's wrong or should be changed?
Yes, I mean, the judge is the one that, or the judge, lawmakers, the laws are already there. I don't get to decide my own version of the law. So, yes, I believe I can make that.
I'm just going to follow up with a few questions on your questionnaire. Again, not trying to trick you. I'll read you the question and I'll read you what you wrote. Just want to follow up. It's fair to say you're not a news hound or a news junkie, right?
No. If it doesn't have much to do with fishing or stuff that's directly related to my life and family, I keep my nose out of it, I guess.
Okay. There's a series of questions in the questionnaire and references to some videos that were released. There was a video that was taken by a bystander that was widely distributed. There were some other videos, including body-worn cameras of the police officers involved, as well as some surveillance videos from neighborhood businesses. Do you remember which videos you saw?
All I can recall ever seeing is maybe a news clip or something like that. Not necessarily a specific video, because I can't actually picture the scenario really in my mind.
Okay.
Just a little clip that comes up, with the news that's going to happen or something like that.
Okay. Like the teasers that come in.
Yeah, you're gonna, as the channel's about to switch from whatever I was watching to whatever I am, whatever would be coming, then you get the little teaser, yeah.
Okay. You were asked, again, I think you were asked generally what you recall about the situation, and you wrote, I do not watch much news, but I do recall seeing a quick news report on this. All I remember is George Floyd died during the arrest or confrontation. That's all you recall about?
Yeah, that would come from the news clip. That's...
You were asked for your general impressions of both Mr. Chauvin as well as Mr. Floyd. You had a neutral response to both, and you wrote essentially the same thing. You said, I don't know anything about them.
Yep, I don't know him personally. I don't know, enough to make a judgment call on anyone really here.
Okay. You were asked if you had ever discussed Mr. Floyd's death with your family, friends, coworkers, or discussed it online, and you checked the box yes. Did you ever post any opinions on social media?
Oh, no, that's not my style.
Okay. And you wrote that you try to stay out of conversations. It is for the court to decide.
Absolutely.
You understand that it would be, if you were a juror on this case, it would be for you to decide.
It would be, but, as a outsider, that's not for me to make a judgment call on.
You were asked about the protests that took place immediately or following the death of Mr. Floyd, and asked whether you thought there were negative or positive effects as a result of those. And you wrote, we do not have protests in my area, but it appears to cause a bit of property damage. Do you think that there's a difference between a protest and a riot?
Absolutely.
Okay. And in your own words, how would you describe the difference between those two?
A protest is a protest. It's a statement. They're making saying their voice. They're speaking their voice, whatnot, and making it known. But a pretty much once it is not peaceful any longer, destruction, destruction of property or anything else, looting, any of that kind of stuff, that is no longer protesting. So,
Okay.
but not anything I really expected much.
Sure.
From our area.
Do you think that there were any positive impacts? I mean, I know you think the property damage from the looting was bad.
Mm-hmm.
Do you think there were any positive impacts from those protests?
It's definitely made this very aware to most people. Right now, you can't really go too much anywhere without somebody talking about it. So.
Fair enough. There were a series of statements. They were kind of these generalized statements, and you were asked to rank your opinion from strongly agree to strongly disagree. And do you recall that generally, that exercise?
Yes.
Okay. There were a couple of questions I had. You wrote, police in my community, or the statement reads, police in my community make me feel safe. And you wrote that you somewhat agree with that. Do you have personal experiences or experiences of friends that have caused you to mistrust police to some degree?
I guess, can you tell me the scale on that?
Sure. It was strongly agree, somewhat agree, no opinion, somewhat disagree, or strongly disagree.
Okay. So that's, I answered near the top on that. I don't have a ton of experience, obviously. Young and dumb at one point. I thought I had plenty of money to drive at whatever speed I wanted, so I got pulled over a lot.
Mm-hmm.
But, I don't have too much, I don't have any real negative opinions.
Okay.
I don't have any negative experience with, cops other than when I was younger. I just,
Right. You were asked, or the statement reads, I support defunding the Minneapolis Police Department, and you somewhat disagreed with that. Why?
Probably because I didn't want to fully disagree with that. I guess I don't feel that defunding the Minneapolis Police Department would be a good idea, but I don't really know that much about what that would entail.
Okay. You were asked a couple of questions about Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter, and you had a somewhat unfavorable opinion of Black Lives Matter and a neutral opinion of Blue Lives Matter. With respect to Black Lives Matter, you wrote, I do not think the riots help. Do you associate the riots with Black Lives Matter?
I would have to say that I possibly do. The riots seem to possibly.
Okay. And you had go ahead. Sorry, you.
Oh no! And again, I don't know enough about them, but they seem to follow them around the country. So
Okay.
that's all
Do you think that everybody who was involved in the riots was a member of Black Lives Matter?
Absolutely not.
You had never heard of the term Blue Lives Matter before?
I need to change that. I wasn't really thinking, I do see I assume it's the flags with the blue stripe on it. I don't know if I really knew it was a full organization type, like, say, Black Lives Matter. I kind of assumed it was more just what everyone, was going with, just to support the police department.
Okay. And you actually had some prior jury service, is that right?
Yes, I was on one.
And that was in a civil case,
It
right?
was.
A personal injury case?
Mm-hmm.
How long ago was that?
Oh, that had to be 12 years ago at least, I would imagine, somewhere in that range.
Okay. And again, without knowing what your verdict was,
Mhm.
we don't want to know that. Did you find that to be a favorable experience?
Yeah, I mean, it was very different, but the process was went well and everything. I mean, it was a 1 day thing, which
Much different than a month-long
much
trial.
different than a month-long,
And again, without knowing how what verdict you rendered, did you actually deliberate with other jurors?
Yes,
And so you have some experience kind of in the deliberation room.
yes.
Did you observe conflict and difference of opinion emerge during that?
There was some briefly, just to discuss each jurors. I guess without other term, opinions on it from what they were everyone was presented.
Okay. But nothing overwhelming, I suppose.
No.
And ultimately, you were asked, do you want to serve as a juror in this case? You check the box, not sure. It is a big case. If I'm the right fit, I will be chosen. But do you still feel that way?
I do. I mean, it's not for me to decide. I don't think anyone that wants to be on a certain something should.
So, do you think you can be a fair and impartial juror?
I believe so.
I mean, it's a kind of a yes. We have to,
Oh,
unfortunately.
absolutely. Sorry. Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I don't mean to press you.
No.
But, you can listen to the evidence as it's presented in court.
Yes.
Will you apply the presumption of innocence?
Yes.
And will you hold the state to its burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt?
Yes.
May I have a moment, Your Honor? Pass for cause.
Mr. Slisher.
Thank you, Your Honor. Well, you're juror number 116.
I am. Yes.
You answered some questions regarding hobbies. You mentioned both fishing and hunting. I'd like to take hunting first. What kind of hunting do you do?
So mainly deer hunting is, we live in Minnesota. It's kind of a group event for, and when it's not a group event, for my, social group, I'm a little bit more on the, I do it more than most people, I suppose.
You do hunting more than most
I do.
people?
I do
Rifle,
in the
archery?
Yep, archery.
Archery.
And then I do also do, rifle season.
Well, I'm fairly confident this trial will not interfere with the
That would be good. I'm a little more concerned about the fishing season, but the hunting season will be all right.
You do not turkey hunt?
I do not. My buddy would like me to one of these years to get out and do that, but well, I'm not itching to get out.
Have no plans this
No.
season? Okay. And then the fishing season doesn't start until
Maybe
the 15th?
ish. I should know the date exactly, but it's catch and release for the first 2 weeks, so
For bass?
bass.
Right. You're a bass fisherman?
I am.
Okay, and so you enter tournaments and whatnot.
Yes.
But it wouldn't be an undue hardship if you missed a little bit of fishing, not that we're expecting you to. You're a little slow to answer that one. Tell me about that.
Memorial weekend. So we do have some time. That's what
with that. Without naming your employer or getting so specific that it would tend to identify you, could you tell me a little bit about your job? What do you do on the what kind of things do you repair?
It's pumps, and related items to that.
Do you have a season that's particularly busier than any other season?
Yeah, I mean, coming up here in another month, it should really pick up here. Without going into the specifics of what I do, yes, it'll be warmer down south very quickly here, so that will affect my job.
And once it warms up, you're called upon to at least service or look at pumps and things fairly soon?
Yeah, we do make the decision based on phone calls, emails, whether or not we bring anything back, and then we would need to go in and actually physically look at the pumps.
And so who is able to, or is your company, you said the company's fairly good size, do they have other employees who can do the type of work you do during the busy season?
They do, yes.
And then just following up a little bit more, on the fact that your employer is not going to be paying you for jury service, you indicated that you would be able to pay your mortgage, pay your bills.
Yes.
How would it affect you financially? I mean, for example, would you have to dip into savings or borrow money?
It would, I mean, we are a dual income family, so it's would cut into my, our plans for the summer potentially, but no, we would be fine. I mean, I would imagine we'll do what's needed to be fine.
Right. A follow-up on two different answers that you gave in your survey, the questionnaire. You indicated that you somewhat disagreed with the statement that police in this country treat whites and blacks equally. And you somewhat disagreed with the statement that the criminal justice system is biased against racial and ethnic minorities. And so I'd like to, back up to the first question regarding police treating blacks and whites differently, equally. You somewhat disagreed with that.
Well, that's what I'm told, I guess. So.
You indicated when you were younger you maybe drove a little too fast?
A little bit.
Okay. You would have never felt discriminated against by police, though, in those situations?
No.
But have you ever had, say, a friend or a coworker share with you their experience of being, in their perception, discriminated against by the police?
No.
And then, following up on your belief, you disagreed with the statement that the criminal justice system is biased against racial and ethnic minorities. You somewhat disagreed with that. again, can you share with me a little bit your perspective on that?
I guess I don't recall that, but I don't, I guess, have anything to, I guess, base that on, I guess.
No personal
No
experience?
personal experience, again. It's,
Our observations or conversations?
yeah, just what you see and again, what you're told to think, I guess, so,
Based on media coverage?
yes.
You indicated that you do somewhat associate the riots with Black Lives Matter, but you also indicated that you believe there is a difference between a riot and a protest, right?
Absolutely.
And you said that you're not a big media follower, or not a big news hound. How is it that you learn about protests and things like that?
I mean, you in the time you can't not see what's happening. Again, you can't go anywhere without hearing what's happening. Just even avoiding stuff, you still hear about it.
And it's been quite a year.
Yes, it has.
Right? There have been obviously the protests and riots that happened in Minneapolis. Did you see any news about any other protests that have happened in Minnesota or elsewhere?
I don't believe I've heard of too much outside of Minneapolis. They could be happening or could have happened, but I guess the big news was what was happening in Minneapolis, and that's what I guess I got bits of information on.
You follow national news? Are you aware of any other major protests?
I really don't
demonstrations?
follow any national news. Like just based on the way I, go about my day. I don't, I guess if it sneaks in through the radio or, I get a little clip of something, but I don't really see too much outside of our state for national news.
Are you aware of the events that happened in Washington, D.C. in January?
Yes.
And how did you learn of those events?
That was all, I was at work, and that's a big thing at work, people talking about it, so, and then again, you see clips of it, not something I really followed there.
Can you describe to me what you saw when you saw it?
Well, that massive amounts of people around the Capitol, in the Capitol, and then obviously milling around where they shouldn't be. I guess there was a couple of injuries and possibly deaths, from what I have heard.
Is what you saw, did you interpret that to be a protest, a riot, both?
It appeared to be a protest at first, but certain parts of it was no longer a protest. That was became a riot in areas because people were beyond where they should have been. They were vandalizing. It became, in portions of it. I mean, I can't speak for all of it because I don't actually know, but the bits and pieces I do know, I've seen, did appear to be more on the riot side.
Did you associate the riot part of that with any particular group or groups?
I think it was kind of known the purpose for the riot. I believe it was, Republican Party type rioting. Just, I think that's why they were there, to protest.
Okay.
So,
when asked about posting opinions on social media, I think that your answer was, that's not my style.
Yes.
So can you tell me, are you...
I'm not, not a confrontational type person. I'm not somebody that, through things I may be scrolling through, and I might see something and look at people's opinions on, their statements on what it, I guess would be their opinion, and I'm not going to comment on any of that just because, I believe that puts yourself out there in a place that is not needed.
So you'd be more likely to put some pictures of fish, I'm assuming?
Absolutely.
Right.
I may briefly comment on somebody's fish or something like that, but anything more controversial, I don't believe it's somebody else's. It's not needed for them to fully understand where I'm at on that.
If I may have a moment, Your Honor. Thank you, Your Honor. The state will strike.
All right, Juror 116, you're excused from this panel, so you don't have to worry about missing work or fast season. So thank you for taking the time to fill out the questionnaire and to come in today.
Thank you.
The deputy will take some paperwork from you. All right, we'll take our morning recess. Let's reconvene at 11 o'clock.